Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that former undisputed champion Chantel Cameron has some fight news pending, a caption she posted to her social media that reads, "Locked in and here we go again." It was conceivable that Chantel Cameron would get back out there at least one more time before this year is out, because even if she is targeting the winner of Taylor versus Serrano 2, or maybe the winner of Ryan versus Mayer, she wouldn't get access to the winners of either of those fights until the following year. So in the in-between time, she's going to have to do something with herself. She's going to have to fight someone. She's only fought once this year, once so far, having made her Queensberry Promotions debut, sporting a professional record of 19 wins with 1 loss, no draws, 8 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 20 professional bouts. Still strong, still durable, fierce, and still one of the best all-around fighters.
A former champion now.
But still one of the best fighters around, anywhere at or around these weights. Last in action in July of this year, not but a few weeks ago, opposite the ring, France's own El Hamekhaled, Chantel was able to stay in character. What is significant is that fight was for a WBC interim title in the super lightweight division. So maybe in Chantel's next fight, she will make a defense of that title now that she's got it, which leads us to the WBC's ranked standings.
Because she's WBC interim champion, it's conceivable that her next opponent may be someone in the WBC's ranked standings. Ranked at number 1 is Mexico's own Carla Zamora.
Might be familiar with that name. That's the same Carla Zamora that traveled to Canada as the away fighter and knocked out Jessica Camara.
That's who.
A fight between her and Chantel would actually be fireworks. I understand that most of the boxing community at large is not familiar with this fighter, is not familiar with Carla Zamora. But if you put Carla in the ring with Chantel, you're going to get a firefight is what you're going to get. You're going to get an all-action shootout between two heavy-handed punchers.
She's ranked at number 1. Jessica Camara is ranked at number 2, though she shouldn't be. It's misleading. These are super lightweight rankings, whereas Jessica is campaigning as a lightweight. She holds a WBA gold title down there at lightweight. She's not campaigning at 140.
But Jessica ranks in at number 2. Belgium's own Ocean Dirieu ranks at number 3. Flora Pili of France ranks at number 4. Samantha Worthington of America ranks in at number 5. Former WBO champion Christina Lenardatu ranks in at number 6. Former WBA champion Ana E. Esther Sanchez ranks in at number 7. Former IBF champion Victoria Bustos ranks in at number 8. And any one of these fighters in the WBC's ranked standings could be who Chantel faces next, in defense of her interim title.
It would make sense.
She has to stay busy. She has to stay sharp. Chantel Cameron is a fighter who, between fights, happens to put on a decent amount of weight. And you don't want to stay inactive for too long putting on that weight.
It's good of Queensberry to get her another fight in a hurry, in a jiffy.
Keep her sharp, keep her active, keep her out there.
Do you think she's going to get the winner of Taylor versus Serrano too?
I don't. I think Amanda Serrano is going to win the rematch. And if she does, that might lead to a Katie Taylor trilogy, which would essentially freeze out Chantel Cameron. No, I would sooner expect Chantel to face the winner of Mayer versus Ryan, who I think is going to be Michaela Mayer.
I think she's going to take Sandy Ryan's belt.
And I don't think Sandy Ryan has a rematch clause incorporated into the contract. Thus, if Michaela beats her, she'll be free to fight somebody else. Somebody like Chantel Cameron. Oh, I know that Michaela might target unification matches afterwards. She might, but Chantel is there too. And Chantel is still a big name.
Just some things to think about.
Concerned that he has an ego and that his ego is going to stop him from dealing with certain individuals, that he's drawing lines in the sand.
Do you know how many buys there was for the Crawford pay-per-view?
Only rumors that, I don't know that rumor we can run with.
I have it on good authority that it wasn't 200,000.
And it was more, I hope.
It was less. It was 200,000, just shy of 200,000. I'm not surprised, man. There's pay-per-view fatigue, dude. How much pay-per-view could the fans handle? So here's what's happening right now, right? If Turkey has it his way, everything's going to be a pay-per-view. And fighters that wouldn't be on pay-per-view now are behind that $80 payment. And while you guys are happy with it, and I understand, you guys are used to paying $80 and you're getting what you want. If this sport continues to be continuing down this pay-per-view route, we're on a slow march to death, to extinction.
That is Gary Jonas, the owner of ProBox TV, who's right and he's wrong at the same time. Where he's right is that you can't put every halfway decent fight behind a paywall, as that will not grow the audience, and there's only so many times in a calendar year you can ask the boxing fans to go into their wallets. He's right about that, which we've often discussed here on the channel, what he dubs pay-per-view fatigue.
I agree with that bit of it. Where I disagree is that this is all on Turkey.
He is trying to outsource the blame for this oversaturated pay-per-view market on Turkey Alalshikh, who really just got here.
That if he has it his way, everything's a pay-per-view.
That's baloney and that's malarkey is what that is, because this has been going on long before Turkey endeavored into the world of boxing. This has been going on for years. And I wonder,
if you want to go back to the beginning, if you want to know where it started, it did not start with Turkey Alalshikh.
If you want to know where it started, look no further than the American market. And no, I'm not talking about when DAZN debuted in America and we're throwing all that money around. This started way before that.
When they did that, they were just trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Going along with something that had already started way back there in 2014. Upon the PBC's inception, when they got all that Waddle and Reed money, and they fucked off all that Waddle and Reed money.
What does that have to do with this?
The practices, the poor business practices and gross oversights that led to them fucking off all of that money and creating an entire crop, an entire stable of fat and happy fighters that are being grossly overpaid for safe fights and showcase fights.
What the hell does that have to do with there being too many pay-per-views?
Because that's where it started. So when you overpay a fighter for what is a safety-first fight, a showcase fight, you're giving anyone from Leo Santa Cruz to Danny Garcia a seven-figure purse in the neighborhood of $1 million or just over $1 million for what are showcase fights, safety-first fights, so that when you do want them to fight someone with a pulse, they want the moon and the stars. They want an arm and a leg, a pint of blood.
They want a lot of money.
So much that it is in excess of their market value, and it is in excess of the show's value, that the amount of money it's going to take to get you in the ring with somebody who can fight back.
This has become the industry standard.
They can't guarantee you that money. All they can hope to do is put the show on pay-per-view because they're hoping the money will come from me and you. The money to satisfy these fighters' inflated financial demands.
Huh?
The fighters got so greedy, the only way you could get them the money they wanted was putting their fights on pay-per-view.
The problem.
Just because you think you're supposed to get a certain amount of money doesn't make it true. And just because you put something on pay-per-view doesn't mean people are going to buy it.
Those responsible with inundating the American market with pay-per-view after pay-per-view after pay-per-view, just an assembly line of box office fights, pay-per-views. Oh, that's the PBC.
That did not start with Turkey Alalshikh, who's been in the sport for what, a little over a year now? That's it? That didn't start with him.
That started with the PBC in 2014 and their poor business practices that led to an assembly line of pay-per-views being put out.
An assembly line of pay-per-views that shrunk the size of the audience over time, I'd say throughout the span of 6 to 7 years.
It's not a coincidence that in the last 6 or 7 years, the more pay-per-views they put out, the more piracy you started to see, the more illegal streams, to the point where it's out of control.
That's when it comes to the piracy.
When it comes to extinction and the survivability of the sport, Gary's not far off. If everything you put out is behind a paywall, there's only so many times people are going to pay per view. A lot of people aren't going to do that. And when they don't, the size of the audience shrinks, the size of the market shrinks, and suddenly boxing becomes a money pit full of loss leaders.
It's not lucrative.
It's not stable. Between the fighters' inflated financial demands that result in too many pay-per-views in tandem with other contributing factors like the PBC's shrinking annual budget, because year after year, their annual budget to do shows got smaller.
It got to the point to where the only way they could even do some of these shows is to bill them as pay-per-views, which is tantamount to crowd-funded boxing, GoFundMe boxing.
The evidence.
They had the nerve. They had the audacity to bill Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia as a pay-per-view in the thick of the pandemic, when the entire American populace is struggling and trying to find a way to make ends meet during the shutdown. They actually billed that fight as a pay-per-view.
Well, it was Errol's first fight back from the car accident.
That's no excuse. The smarter thing to do would have been to bill that fight as a regular fight on Fox, which reaches millions upon millions upon millions of homes like terrestrial channels do. The smart thing to do would have been to bill that fight as a regular fight on the regular schedule to get millions of eyes on it. They chose to be greedy.
Why?
Likely to get Danny and Errol the kind of money they wanted.
Which in the end couldn't have been very much, because the pay-per-view only did a little over 200,000, 225 or 250. That's not a lot. You're compromising millions of viewers that could be viewing this fight as a regular fight on a big terrestrial channel versus a little over 200,000 people that decided to buy it.
On pay-per-view, because left to their own devices, the PBC would bill almost any solid fight, every halfway decent fight as a pay-per-view, and that's what they're doing now. Every fight they've done this year has been a pay-per-view.
This practice did not start with Turkey.
It started with them, and it's been that way with them for years. On Fox, on Showtime, now with Amazon.
Nobody else in the American market puts out more pay-per-views than them. Nobody. Not Top Rank, not Golden Boy, not Matchroom.
They put out more pay-per-views than everybody and have been putting out more pay-per-views than everybody. So if Gary Jonas is going to assign the blame to those who are actually responsible, then you're not talking about Turkey. You're talking about the PBC, and you're talking about Al Heyman.
Ruiz versus Areola. Chris Areola. That should have been a pay-per-view. Luis Ortiz versus Charles Martin on New Year's Day.
That should have been a pay-per-view. Ruiz versus Ortiz. That should have been a pay-per-view.
You're complaining about the cards that Turkey's putting out now. What did you think about those cards?
Turkey shows. Turkey's cards are better than those cards, top to bottom.
They're solid.
Whereas a PBC card, you might get one halfway decent fight and the main event, and a forgettable undercard where you don't even remember who the hell fought on that show.
So he's not wrong when he says that the market is oversaturated, but he's blaming the wrong person.
Don't put that on Turkey. Don't blame him for that. Al Heyman started that.
PBC's still doing it.
They haven't even done a regular fight, a non-pay-per-view fight this entire calendar year, and we're in August.
It's looking like they'll be lucky if they can do one non-pay-per-view show.
So don't vilify Turkey. He didn't create this monster. He didn't create this Frankenstein.
Al did.
Wilder versus Ortiz 2 was billed as a pay-per-view. That was ages ago. Why, though? Nobody was asking Wilder to fight Ortiz again. He knocked him out in the first fight. It was done.
And all that sold was a little over 200,000 pay-per-view buys.
For years, I tried to tell people that a number like that on a network like Showtime, that's not good and that's not sustainable. You're compromising the regular schedule of fights for a couple of buys and a couple of dollars on pay-per-view. And in the long run, it's going to backfire on you.
How?
Do you remember what Gary Jonas said? That fighters that should be fighting on the regular schedule, now you're hiding them. You're hiding them behind a paywall. If you would have did Wilder versus Ortiz 2 as a regular fight on Showtime, that might have brought in excess of 1 million viewers on a Saturday night to the Showtime platform, and the higher-ups at Showtime would have saw those metrics, and they would have liked that. But when you bill it as a pay-per-view, and all it really brings in is a little over 200,000 buys, yeah, they don't really benefit from that.
Why not?
Because the networks are in it for the metrics, the amount of viewers that you can bring to their platform, and the more viewers you bring, the more valuable the block becomes, the time slot.
If you're bringing in 1 million, 2 million, 3 million at a particular time of day, that block becomes valuable.
Then big companies and big brands, they're going to want to advertise their products during that time slot.
That's good for the network.
More eyes on a fight, over 1 million or 2 million, is good for the fighters and good for their brand, because now more people know about them, so that when you do put them on pay-per-view, people are more inclined to buy it because they know these fighters. They've been watching these fighters.
Though you shouldn't abuse the box office. You shouldn't overuse pay-per-view. And that's what Al Heyman has been doing. So in 2020, in the thick of the pandemic, when they decided to build Danny Garcia versus Errol Spence as a pay-per-view, you know that same year, Teofimo Lopez fought Vasyl Lomachenko. The original plan for Lomachenko versus Lopez was to bill it as a pay-per-view. They spent a little over a year or 2 years building that fight. But given the extenuating circumstances of that particular year, the people at Top Rank and ESPN held back on billing it as a pay-per-view and billed it as a regular fight instead, to get more eyes on it. The fighters didn't get to make as much money as they thought they would, but those are the breaks for the greater good.
That's what they had to do. Whereas in the name of greed and egos, what the PBC decided to do that same year was bill Errol Spence Jr. versus Danny Garcia as a pay-per-view, and not that many people bought it.
250,000 buys on a network the size of Fox? That's nothing. That's a drop in the bucket. You're compromising millions and millions of eyes that could have been watching that fight just to make a few more dollars.
That's the logic they've been using. So when you see that the American market is oversaturated, there are too many pay-per-views, don't put that on Turkey, because he just got here.
Just keeping up with the standard that the Americans set.
And I don't know why Gary Jonas keeps trying to vilify Turkey. I don't know why he keeps trying to put everything on Turkey and his ego and his pay-per-views.
You've been living under a rock?
Problems that boxing has had didn't all of a sudden start when he got here. They've been here. All he's trying to do is make the fights that boxing wasn't making on its own. And he's done a good job of that. Yes, they're pay-per-views, but they're worth it, as opposed to the garbage the PBC has been shelling out. If you want to criticize somebody, criticize them.
He's actually helping boxing by supplementing the effort.
Without him, the promoters and the platforms would have to try to find the money to do some of these fights. And if they can't find it, well, these fights don't happen.
That's the short version, because I don't want to be long-winded.
So when a generous benefactor steps in and supplements the effort, he's willing to put the money up to ensure that these fights happen. That creates a surplus for the promoters, money they didn't have to spend since he's footing the bill.
He's paying for it. They can then dedicate that money to doing other shows.
The fighters get a chance to make career-high purses they would not otherwise make. The fans get to see fights they would not otherwise see.
Well, what did you think? That Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren were going to orchestrate a tournament all on their own?
Yeah, right.
I'm just giving it to you straight because it's the only way I know how to give it to you.
I think Gary's got his wires crossed. When he talks about Turkey, it sounds like he's talking about Al.
Because everything you said about Turkey applies to Al.